Welcome back to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Tina Tasaka, and this is the B block, or second section of our news show. We always start with a look at what's going on outside of the U.S. First up, if you have chronic back pain like millions of Americans do, you might want to consider using cannabis to help with your pain. Results from a controlled study out of Hanover, Germany, were published in the journal Nature. The study followed 800 patients split into two groups. 50% received an extract containing cannabinoids, including a microdose of THC, while the other half received a placebo. The medicine was produced by a German company called Vertanical. After 12 weeks, the treated group reported a 2-point reduction in pain on an 11-point scale, almost twice the improvement seen with the placebo. Dr. Michael Karst, the study's author, reported that cannabis can significantly reduce pain and improve physical function in patients with chronic low back pain without the safety concerns commonly associated with opioids. Dr. Karst is a pain specialist at the Hanover Medical School and a consultant for Vertanical. Our regular reporter in the UK, Dave Barton, attended a hemp conference in Iceland this week. Here's his report.
I'm Dave Barton from Thermador with your UK Cannabis report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. A new study shows that full-spectrum cannabis extracts offer significant pain reduction in patients with chronic lower back pain. The Phase 3 trial evaluated VER01, a full-spectrum sativa extract, in 820 people and found that more than half achieved at least a 30% reduction in pain, alongside improvements in sleep quality and physical function. The study, conducted at Hanover Medical School in Germany, has been praised by medicinal cannabis advocates in the UK, including former government drugs policy advisor, Professor David Nutt. That's all for this week's UK report. I'm Dave Barton from Thermador, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
This is Debi Facey with the Canadian Coast to Coast Cannabis News Report. So what we have in Canada this week is some great news when it came to the pain management. So what we had was a test that they did for a 12-week or 12-month period, which is a year. It was to use the sesame seed oil with a full spectrum cannabis extract, which is most likely RSO. And what they did was they were able to utilize this test and see that over, not only did the pain management actually become way more manageable, avoiding any sort of opiates that are going to be normally prescribed, but it had helped over 500 million people worldwide throughout this whole trial period, which is a great scientific fact, especially when it comes to us creating more pain management, especially when it comes to the cannabis industry. So this is a great thing. The next thing that we have in Canada is that we are now using the overall GSM-1 barcode system, which means that this standard barcode system is going to be something that is going to be a lot easier for more of these LPs and stores to be able to follow along when it comes to their stock, when it comes to their batches, as well as any recalls that have to be done. So when it comes to Canada, this is Debi Facey with your Canadian Coast to Coast Cannabis News Report. Peace.
If you are thinking of a trip to Florida, you might be relieved to know that Florida's police can no longer use the smell of cannabis as a reason to stop and search your car. This week, the District Court of Appeals in Florida's 2nd District ruled on a case where a man on probation was stopped because of the smell of cannabis in his vehicle. The police ordered the occupants out of the car and then conducted what was actually an illegal search when they found weed in the vehicle. Now, the judge's opinion set the record straight for law enforcement. Judge Nellie Kuzam's decision said, quote, "For generations, cannabis was illegal in all forms, thereby rendering its distinct odor immediately indicative of criminal activity. But several legislative amendments over the years have fundamentally changed this definition and the regulation. The cumulative result is that cannabis is now legal to possess in multiple forms, unquote. Illinois is still trying to figure out what to do about the very same issue, but right now our Illinois guy Mark Allen is ready to launch his clone operation just outside of Chicago. Here's Mark, the Chicago clone guy.
What's up, everybody? I'm Mark Allen, the Chicago clone guy, reporting from just outside of Chicago, Illinois, at the Chicago cloning facility. And what you see behind me is the beginning of the clone nursery. There's approximately about 30 clones behind me. And there are 9 different strains from breeders all across the country. But this is just the beginning of what is going to be many, many, many plants. So I'm looking forward to taking you all along the road of this journey with me. But the reason why we're here with Cannabis Coast to Coast News is to talk about the news. So Curaleaf cannot keep itself out of court. One of its old regional compliance directors is suing them, alleging that there has been systematic diversion at Curaleaf. And if you're anything like me, you're wondering, what is systematic diversion? So I kind of had to look it up. I had my suspicions, but what this gentleman, the old regional compliance director, is saying that, simply put, there's a lot of theft going on, and that theft is making it into the black illicit market. On top of this, he's also alleging that the Department of Agriculture has flagged them for numerous violations, citing health concerns, environmental concerns. There's also other whistleblowers from inside the organization that have cited them with issues that, simply put, they're saying that Curaleaf just covered up and didn't do anything about, allegedly. So there's big things happening with Curaleaf. But in other news, Monticello, Illinois banned all synthetic Delta H, synthetic drugs, and kratom, which people there are a little upset about because they were using that in place of painkillers, which I've actually taken kratom, and it acts like a painkiller. That's not for me. But anyways, that sums up the news for Illinois. I'm Mark Allen, the Chicago clone guy, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
This was the first week back at the helm of the Massachusetts Cannabis Commission for Shannon O'Brien. She's the one who was suspended, fired, and then reinstated after a 2-year court battle. She's already upsetting the cannabis apple cart with another delay in rolling out the social consumption rules and regulations that had made progress when she was in the doghouse. With more from the Bay State, here is Curtis Emery.
I'm Curtis Emery, a bud tender from Resonate in Worcester, Massachusetts, with the Bay State Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. O'Brien returns as the chair officially for the CCC this week as she led the first meeting back since her return. At this meeting, O'Brien pledged to recommit the CCC to be more just and a better, more trustworthy regulatory body. O'Brien says this is not a return for her, but a new beginning for the regulatory body as she sees it, which should move forward with purpose and justice on the forefront. Another decision from the CCC, they decided to send back a drafted penalty against the Boston Bud Factory, a Western Mass dispensary, which has been in hot legal water since they engaged in illegal promotional activities, including operating a joint vending machine at a arcade in Western Mass, as well as operating a social consumption table at a block party, of which the dispensary neither controlled nor established an age gate to verify the legal consumption age of any of the participants at that block party. The proposed punishment included a 14-day suspension of cultivation and retail activities, to which O'Brien questioned whether or not this would have an appropriate effect on the higher-up management of the company or a disproportionate effect on the low-wage workers at the cultivation and retail sites. With this industry, the real backbone is the cultivation workers and the bud tenders. These are people that actually move the industry. And I think the CCC made a great decision by questioning those penalties, sending them back for revision, and hoping for a better result, which would place the BAME where it deserves, on the C-suite and the management of that establishment. I've been Curtis Emery with the Bay State Report, Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
There's a new definition of what is legal hemp in the state of Georgia. A passage of Senate Bill 494 this past week has redefined THC to include THCA after decarboxylation. You can find THCA in many products at legal licensed dispensaries and the unregulated hemp market. THCA and the decarboxylation process allowed wicked smart scientists, chemists, and botanists to figure out a way you can get high when you ignite it. While the government created this as a result of the 2018 Farm Bill, lawmakers at the federal and state level continue to struggle with understanding the science behind the plant. Like many humans, the easy way out is, of course, to just ban these products. But if you've learned anything about hemp and its derivatives from the battle in Texas, regulation is much more a fair way of approaching these new frontiers for intoxication. Banning these hemp products has been in the crosshairs on the national front, as well as targets for lawmakers in all states. Now, it's Virginia's turn to fight against that movement. Here's Joe Parsons with the Virginia Report.
I'm Joe Parsons with the Virginia Cannabis Connection from Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WV, and reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. The Virginia Department of Agricultural and Consumer Services, or VDACS, has sent out letters to all the businesses that sell hemp-derived products and THCA flower. That, effective immediately, Virginia officials will be inspecting and doing testing and evaluations on all products sold in the Commonwealth. The Farm Bill of 2018 allowed for a loophole that would allow for products like THCA to be sold under guidelines as long as they were in compliance with VDAC's regulations. THCA only turns into Delta-9 when it is heated. Therefore, by dry weight, these products were legal and covered under the 2018 Farm Bill. However, Virginia, following the path of the lawmakers in Texas, are now going to enforce the total THC count, including THCA, before heat is applied. This move will ravish the hemp and THCA legal market. Companies like Higher Education are directly in the line of fire. They have made a legal THCA line a staple of their inventory. And stores like Skooma and Greener Things will be hit even harder, as hemp-derived products are basically all they sell. My co-host and friend Seth from Higher Education has already pulled all of his THCA flower and vapes from shelves to be compliant. But other stores are refusing to move their inventory. And it seems like they're in denial that the rules will not affect their businesses, and they claim that they'll still be in compliance. Rumor is some are even including CBD distillate for free. That way, the THC to CBD 25-to-1 ratio is still met. This move will also push more and more consumers without medical cards back into the legacy market once again, and is a reason to vote in the upcoming election. The future of the market depends on your voice. Lastly, this week on Coffee Talk, I was honored to have the editor of Green State, Rochelle Gordon, on the show. She's one of my favorite cannabis journalists and another one of the nominees for Cannabis Journalist of the Year. It was great to share her story and a few other cannabis stories with one of the best in the industry. Well, that's going to do it for this week's Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WV in Charlottesville, and reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Joe Parsons. Until next time, stay lifted.
Did you know that despite 24 states still enjoying an adult use open market for legal cannabis, and another 16 who have medical cannabis programs and have decriminalized it, do you know there's still 600 arrests every day for nonviolent cannabis crimes in this country? That stat, courtesy of our friends at Normal, but they also report that 50% of all arrests in Alabama are for possession crimes of cannabis. Well, that state continues to crack down on the hemp industry, and according to our own Jennifer Boozer Stewart, 90% of the hemp businesses in Alabama have been shut down and closed, and that includes her own. Needless to say, Jennifer's pretty perturbed, bummed out, upset, since she's very proud of her Southern heritage and her home state of Alabama. To make matters worse, the football team is having an off year. Here's Jennifer Boozer Stewart with this week's Alabama Cannabis Report.
I'm Jennifer Boozer Stewart reporting from Alabama for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I read an article this week that was grading each state's mental health services. And guess who was at the bottom of the list? If you guessed Alabama, you were right. Between the poverty level, the lack of jobs, oppression, we don't even have a number one football team this year or last year. It's pretty demoralizing to live down south here in Alabama. Add to that the passage of HB 445, which wiped out 90% of hemp products available that help people with mental health issues, and you've got a recipe for disaster. Not only do we not have delivery rooms and pediatric services in 23 counties, mental health services are almost non-existent here, and now they've taken away the people's ability to self-medicate with plant medicine. Interestingly enough, the 3 states who scored the highest for mental health services, New York, New Jersey, and Hawaii, are all fully legal states. You would think Alabama wouldn't want a bunch of people with mental health issues running around on top of all the other problems that we have with drugs and violence and crime. But hey, roll Tide. I'm Jennifer Boozer, reporting from Alabama for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
The state of Ohio is enjoying a boost in sales thanks to the new pre-roll laws, and they still have plenty of other issues that they have to deal with considering they have a prohibitionist-leaning legislature. Christina Brisson tells us this week about a handful of companies who are now suing the state over their restrictive advertising rules. Here's her Ohio Cannabis Report for this week.
I'm Christina Brisson with Over the Top Renovations with your weekly Ohio Cannabis Report with Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Currently, there are 7 Ohio companies that are suing state regulators over strict product and advertising rules, which they allege are operating under outdated medical laws and should be updated to adhere to our new recreational cannabis laws, which I would have to say that I do agree. Riviera Creek has now made an exclusive grower and distributor product agreement with Cheech and Chong Cannabis. And as well, Bloom has now opened its 7th dispensary in Ohio in Athens, where I do have a daughter that goes to college there, and I can say they can benefit from another dispensary that has a wider reach. Looking forward to more growth here in Ohio and future updates, hopefully. I am Christina Brisson with Over the Top Renovations with your weekly Ohio Cannabis Report with Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Up next is some news of progress in the state of Kentucky, which is still waiting to open up their first medical facility. But they do have some grows going on, and Robin Alford is keeping an eye out for any positive signs in her state. But like watching paint dry, watching cannabis grow and waiting for it to grow is a slow process, but at least it has begun. Here's Robin's Kentucky Report.
I am Robin Alford, coming to you with the Kentucky Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This week, we had a Tier 3 cultivator open up in Madison County, and eventually they will expand to 25,000 square feet, and that's going to be a lot of medicine, a lot of love for patients that need it. And it'll be probably a few months before they get the product on the market, and eventually with the Tier 3 cultivators, they are going to test the market first to see how many patients they have, how much they need, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to be a few months, so everybody can be patient, and we will get everything rolling. So this is Robin Alford with the Kentucky Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
A special message to Robin on behalf of the entire Cannabis Coast to Coast News team. Our deepest sympathies and condolences to you and your family after the passing of your former husband. And finally tonight, a special appeal to our audience is many of you who watch our news regularly, you know I love to teach and educate people. I'm very proud of our staff at the Cannabis Coast to Coast News team. Well, I'm back at Curry College just outside of Boston this semester teaching an introduction to sportscasting on TV and radio, a course I've actually taught there since 2009. Now I'm taking my teaching skills online, and I've joined a new platform called Skool.com. That's school with a K. And one of the reasons I'm really looking forward to working with this platform is that I will be able to live stream an open talk show every Monday night starting October 13th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Many members of our news team have already signed up, and there is a free trial with the school, but again, it's only $1 a month and you can cancel anytime. That's just to become a member of my community called the Forever Young School of Communication. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, and it's time for school. That's school with a K. I love the name of this platform because it's the first course I'll be teaching where spelling really doesn't count. It's how words sound, how you pronounce them, and how clear your speech is. Do you have the mumbles? You know what I mean? Do you have the dreaded itis, gap fillers? The course is called Teaching Generation Text to Talk. I've done this for decades as a professional broadcaster on TV. I've even won an Emmy Award as a sports talk show host for a kids show I co-created in the 1990s for the TV channel that I worked for in Boston. I've mentored hundreds of young people on their journey in the broadcast community, and I'm sure some of them will join me to share what they are doing now. And the whole idea of this is to get people to listen when you talk and to get them to understand you. I use the decades of experience I have in broadcasting to share the tools and exercises that will improve your oral communication skills, even the nonverbal ones. You know, many speech experts believe that 90% of communication is nonverbal. Do you make eye contact? Do you talk with your hands, like I do? Is your handshake firm or wimpy? All these skills will help you build your confidence by putting the phone down and actually talking to people. Do you have a personal elevator pitch? Who are you? Where are you from? What do you do for a living? What distinguishes you or differentiates you from others who might be applying for the same job? I've got 10 one-hour lessons that I'll be offering to individuals or in groups of 5. I call the workshops EPIC. That's E for enunciation, P for pronunciation, I for inflection, and C for cadence. I'll also be offering a free 1 hour, once a week call-in show where you could just join me to ask any questions you want. I've got a background in sports, so I love to talk about that, but I've also built a network for one of the most controversial industries in modern society. That's right, it's the cannabis industry. I'm the executive producer of the nation's only TV news-style show called Cannabis Coast to Coast News with the very talented Elena Pinto. Now, it's all about learning how to talk, to speak, to communicate like a broadcaster. It's epic! So join my community that I'm calling the Forever Young School of Communication. Sign up for the first course, Teaching Generation Text to Talk. And for now and forever, I'm Jimmy Young, and I look forward to talking to you. Well, that'll do it for this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. For Kimmy Cannabis, Amy Carter, Curtis Emery, and Tina Tasaka, I'm executive producer Jimmy Young, reminding you all that it's a whole new world of weed out there. Please educate yourself and consume responsibly. Elena Pinto will be back next week.
I think I messed up. Did you know there's a place that covers all the cannabis news you need? Pro Cannabis Media is now WPCM TV, your go-to website for things cannabis. WPCM TV is the CNBC of weed, bringing you the latest news you need.
Amy Carter. This week, she reports from inside the State House in Lansing.
I'm Amy Carter from Michigan Weedsters with this week's Michigan Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
And talk shows about all things cannabis.
Well, thank you, and thank you for y'all all you're doing to get the word out. Like, this show is so important.
It all started back in 2018 when Emmy award-winning talk show host Jimmy Young kicked it off with the In the Weeds podcast.
That it's not just any generic paper towel. You do have a brand that you use, right?
Yeah, we live or die by the bounty. I mean...
The quicker picker-upper! I love that!
His mission? Building an army of multimedia journalists and podcast hosts who are documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition in this country and around the world. Fast forward to today, and we've got the nation's only weekly cannabis coast-to-coast news program with Elena Pinto.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News, WPCM TV's weekly production of the fight to end cannabis prohibition in this country and around the world. I'm Elena Pinto.
Delivering the nation's only TV news-style program. Since June 2021, WPCM TV has racked up over 1.3 million views, with 17 million impressions, and picked up over 16,000 subscribers on YouTube alone. For more information, contact the team at WPCMTV.com.